of your user base. And it's just a matter of whether or not, the average device that your users are equipped with will struggle with VP9. And if that happens to be the case, I think you want to just, okay, as I'm saying this, I'm actually thinking through it as well. So I was going to say you could make it a matter of configuration and just not enable VP9 unless you're confident in your user base. Now, you specifically asked about what can we not adjust to that dynamically. We basically discover that a device is struggling too much with VP9, and can we downgrade to VP8 in these cases? I mean, technically it's doable. I don't know that we would ever spend any time doing that because it wouldn't be trivial. And it'll be an interesting question whether you want to actually drop to VP8 or just change the constraints of encoding for VP9, maybe drop the resolution or something to make it easier on that. Well, it's all doable. We are not planning on doing any of it. And before doing any of that, we're going to have to see it in action and see, we don't even know at this point how VP9 stacks up against the other components of the conference. Like, how does it compare to rendering? How does it compare to decoding multiple participants, to the functionality of the app altogether? So we don't even know how much of a problem we have to solve there.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks.
Sure. Anyone else? And by the way, Jonathan, do you have anything to add there? Yes.
Oh, yeah, just one other comment on that. I mean, we are planning to have a mode where, for instance, we can know, if we know statically that this endpoint doesn't have a good VP9 encoder, I mean, most notably currently, even if it can decode VP9, most notably currently Firefox has a bug where it won't encode either simulcast or SVC for VP9. We're going to not use VP9 to send, even if we we are planning to have some support for that, and we may expose that as a config option so that you can say, okay, just set for this browser, just set a config, whatever.
Well, so there was one thing that one of you mentioned earlier, which was about the case where, say, a third participant joined in and wasn't able to stream at VP9, and the idea of renegotiating that sounds a little bit like the same problem.
So
the criteria.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly, the criteria might be different, but certainly the ability to say, even if you could theoretically decode VP9, say I don't want to pretend I can't. That's just a matter of not setting that config option, and then we need to figure out how much we expose that through the API versus do it internally in libjitsi meet.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, but I think the complexity here is, so once you have that option, which obviously we will do, like deciding what to do in the case of poor performance is the tricky part, because you would have to determine that there is poor performance, and you have to agree on how you're doing that. You'd have to decide on, how long of a performance spike you're going to wait in order for this to happen. And then even then, it'd be interesting to see how much of that performance spike is actually due to your current encoding and how much of it will go away if you switch. These are, I think, the parts that are, tricky to.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think that, the various static hard coding, like on if the endpoint has these characteristics, don't do VP9, it's going to be much easier than anything dynamic. And even that's not going to be super easy.
Right. I hear two very distinct axes on this, though. One of these is the ability to naturally transition between encoding formats if that was desirable, and a separate one, which is a lot more complex, which is the question of, what is the quality criteria that we favor here? Is it, resolution or bandwidth or processor or all these things, right? And that's a complex one that's highly subjective.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a mechanism versus policy split here.
Okay, awesome.
Hopefully we'll get the mechanism working and maybe leave the policy to people's own configuration.
But I have a quick question about VP9. Is VP9 meant to be improved over time, meaning like being like in tests you've been doing, is VP9 really that much more resource intensive? I know we win on the bandwidth because it's a
the last I've heard is that it's not particularly. I think it depends a lot. I mean, I think certainly from what I've heard, the versions in desktops and browsers are pretty much comparable. Possibly because Google is putting more effort into VP9 optimizations than VP8, even though it's, you know, notionally a higher complexity codec. For mobile endpoints, I'm less certain. But I think there's been, if you go to the community forum, there's some reports by somebody who's been experimenting with this, so possibly open a discussion there will be the best way forward, because we haven't done a lot of experiments with this.
But it's fair to assume that over 9, VP9 will take over, and resource-wise, it might get like up to par, up the same level as VP8 is consuming right now. I mean, assume it's a, you know, it wouldn't be a surprising outcome. I'd say assume is a little strong. And all this is really more to do with what Google does than what we can do, because all this is in the browsers. Because just on Google Meet, I think they use VP9, and seriously, like resource-wise, it's under control. I mean, you can tell the difference that much between Jitsi and Google Meet. So I was just wondering. All right, thanks.
Other questions?
Well, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I don't really have a question. Well, I probably just have a few comments. First, I want to say thank you. This is Freddie. I'm quite like the.
Thank you, Freddie.
The notorious person in your community. So I want to say thank you to the guys. It's really been amazing. I think that when I personally look back at 2020, this will be the one good thing that happened, you know, with all the calamity all over. And I'm saying this as a person who's not heavily tech inclined. I feel really good. I feel like a superstar when I show off Jitsi to people and say, hey, I built that. So thank you so much. Especially want to thank, you know, the presence that you have in the community. You know, just having, you know, the frontline devs being available. It's been really amazing. And at least the few people that I've interacted with, Damien Dementia almost always seems to be there. Doesn't matter what time of the day. I really appreciate that. And Sahul, you know, jumps in. We see him. Actually, I almost feel like I know when they're going to be there. So if I need to pin them, I can just hang around the corner. And of course, Baldino and Jonathan and Jay Jala. I should probably learn their names, right? I'm just using the screen names. But thank you so much, guys. It's been really amazing. And thank you, ML, for making me feel that much better as a human being. I feel like 2020 Jitsi has just been that thing that has improved my personal value as a person. So thank you so much. Just in terms of VP9, and I'm not nearly as technical as
before you go there, thank you very much, Freddie, for the kind words. We really, really appreciate the feedback. That's warming our hearts. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I mean, it's very well deserved, you know, and very long-winded. So let me just not go too far. But yeah, in terms of VP9, I actually have tested, and thank you, Jonathan, for your patience, and Jala. I actually ran the test there. Interestingly, on my end, it seemed, and I could be wrong, right? But I tried to do the test as objectively as possible. It actually seems like the resource demand from VP9 is actually much better than VP8 from what I saw. So I used a very basic, like a laptop I wouldn't even use for anything seriously. I was able to pretty much able to handle it. And not just that, when I looked at the, you know, like the CPU and the memory usage and all of that, it was better than what I had on VP8. So I don't know. And I went into it expecting, you know, that VP9 was going to break it, because that's just been the big thing about the resource demands that he has. But I didn't notice that. So I don't know what, I mean, obviously, there's probably been some improvement in the background somewhere, but just from my experience, it seems to perform better from that perspective in terms of the resource on the client end. And actually, even on my server, yeah, I monitored it on the server as well. My CPU load went down on the server. Memory was at par, maybe just a little better even. On the client end, the CPU load was significantly better. And in terms of the bandwidth, obviously, we know that the upload bandwidth was amazing. The download at certain resolutions or depending on the number of tiles was a bit more. But then I think the more clients that I had added to the call, the bandwidth actually went down. So when I compared it with like what I like to think of as the frontline, like the industry leader, it performed significantly better. And of course, I'm a big Jibri person, as Baldino will tell you. I'm always bugging him on that. And I was able to tweak my Jibri to actually do a great recording on it. So when I did a comparison between it and, the other people that we're not going to mention, I got much better results. So I'm not quite sure where the constraints are or what the concerns are that people have about it.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you did your tests?
Right. So I ran I have my own server, and then I basically started a meeting, and I had one with 4 and one with 5. So I had on my Mac I had 2. I kept it at a maximum of 2. Then I had an old PC, then I had a desktop, and then I used my Android device, and I had the meeting on the laptop, the PC laptop, which is
and you had the meeting configured to use VP9?
Yes, I had it configured to use VP9. So I used Jonathan's PR, and then I did, the GCOFO changes that we're supposed to do. So that actually brings me to a question I shouldn't forget. I need to know how to confirm that it's actually using SVC. Because I've been looking online, I couldn't find any way to actually confirm that. But going back to the test itself, so the PC was really weak. It's probably like 50,000 years old, the laptop that I used. And it was the one that I actually used to measure it because I was trying to do a stress test. Like if anything is going to be affected, it would be that one. And I just basically checked using the stats from the task manager in Windows 10. And you can see the difference, right? Like when I look in the task manager, I was able to look to the performance tab, I looked at the bandwidth, I looked at the memory, I looked at the CPU, and those were the indices that I checked.
Okay.
Actually, put a post on. Actually, posted this in the community. I did what I thought was a pretty detailed post on my setup and the results that I got.
All right. Thank you very much. This is very helpful. Jonathan, with regard to the SVC question, I think you cannot not have it, right?
Yeah, on Chrome, I'm pretty sure that if you're getting any kind of, you will always use SVC rather than scalability. So if you're, receiving, if the bridge is correctly, forwarding to the receiver a lower resolution than the encoder is sending, then yes, it's using SVC. Yeah, and so like I said, I'm pretty confident with Chrome that yeah, it'll work properly. I mean, and give good performance, like you said. I mean, my concern is more around, I don't know if when you think you'd use Android, if that was Chrome on Android or if that was the mobile client. I'd be curious to know what, I guess.
I use a mobile client. Yeah, I use a mobile client.
Okay. And that also gave good experience?
It was perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have any problems at all with a mobile client.
Well, that's good news. That's good news.
Yeah. So the only thing I did notice though, later when I actually had a meeting with it, I noticed that I had a few dropped frames during the meeting. And it wasn't terrible, right? But I just noticed that I didn't actually have that with the VP8. It wasn't anything, and it certainly is not going to stop me. I mean, I just feel like VP9, once you have a taste of it, you're not going back. So there is no going back for me. Even if the meeting crashes in the middle, I'm still staying with VP9.
Okay. All right. Well, good news. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think at this point it'll only work for Chrome or the mobile clients, which are basically using a Chromium internally. We'll probably have more difficulty with Firefox or Safari. So we want to get that resolved before we actually land it. But,
awesome. But thanks again. Thank you.
Thank you, Freddie. Any other questions?
We have two questions in the chat, so maybe we should address those.
All right. So,
May I ask this question, please?
absolutely, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I have another question concerning, it's known as Jitsi Desktop. It's a Windows app. And just a minute, I prepared it to show you what I mean, this app. And I tried it several times. Sending messages and files works very, very fine. But no video calls, or sometimes it works, sometimes not, and I have no idea. But I read on the German Wikipedia the development of this application has been terminated, but I'm not sure. Is that true?
Yes, that is true, I'm afraid.
So that means, okay, great. Not great. Understood. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, so going to the questions here. Majory, on Meet Jitsi, you mentioned a few limitations that Jitsi Meet has compared to 8x8 Meet, including a new 50 participants limit. Is this limitation, as well as the other ones listed on the site, live yet? So the limitations on Meet Jitsi are primary ones that come from the fact that Meet Jitsi does not have identity as a feature, which in and of itself is a feature to many people because you can use it without needing to identify yourself. There's normally there isn't a limitation around participation. The two projects had for a long time been limited to 75 participants. Then we moved them to 100. Currently, Meet Jitsi is temporarily back to 75 while we're looking at some performance issues. So that's the situation there. We'll probably bring it back to 100 once we're comfortable with the performance. Hopefully that answers the question. Then, Gigabyte Service has a question: how to get a variable value from the Prosody module to Jitsi frontend? Well, you send it as an XMPP message. I'm not sure I understand the question though, but the way I understand it, that would be the answer.
One, you can look at the procedure module we have already in Jitsi Meet, and for example, I think duration, speaker stats, they send JSON back to the client, so you can use that as an example.
No, so there's a clarification here from Gigabyte Service. I have seen Jitsi take service and available value when room reacted max participants, for example, in mod occupants, max occupants. I think it passes from GCOFO, but how can we do without modifying GCOFO? So again, so service and available is something that's actually most often generated by the Prosody server itself. It's not something that is generated by business logic, to put it that way. I think Damien's response is probably what you need. Like, it's look at the speaker stats and you can see how examples of how we do that.
And of course, ask your questions in the community so we can continue there.
All right. Any other questions?
Actually, just to chip in a little bit, the gentleman that was talking earlier about the Jitsi desktop application, I wonder if he's confusing the Electron app with the deprecated Jitsi desktop thing, because I've seen that happen.
He actually shared. He actually shared the UI. It was indeed the desktop app.
Right, that's what he shared, but that was in the Electron app. And what I've seen a lot in the community is that people think that Jitsi desktop, the deprecated one, is the one they're supposed to use to connect to the current Jitsi meetings. So I wonder if that's the same issue he's having, if he's aware that there's actually a desktop app that's for Jitsi Meet, that's the electronic app, as opposed to the deprecated Jitsi desktop.
That's a good point. So would you, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of who was reporting that. Oh, was that you, Constantine? Okay, yeah. So why are you using the desktop app actually? What's your motivation?
Well, in the beginning, I got many questions from friends and also customers who asked me, can I use it as Skype? For example, you have installed any kind of app, and then you get an incoming message, maybe somebody's calling you. So you don't need to be always online on a certain website. That's what the people bothered. But and I tried to install this app and also to make phone calls or maybe video calls about via this application, but it didn't work. And so this is because the development on this app has been terminated already.
So actually, yeah, well, you could almost, that's a completely different app. The two are entirely incompatible with each other. You couldn't use the desktop app to join this call, for example. They have never worked together. And the only thing they share is actually a lot of code, but other than that, it's that they're not addressing the same use cases at all. So Jitsi Meet is meant as a rendezvous service. Like it works well with Matrix, for example. It even has a nice integration. Works well with Mattermost. So if you're looking for, a combination of messaging and Jitsi, Mattermost and Matrix are good ways to get that. Rocket Chat as well uses Jitsi, and it covers the chat part. So there are multiple examples for these synergies, which is a big part of the reason why we discontinued development on Jitsi desktop.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you, Freddie, for digging deeper. All right. Well, I think we'll cut it at this point. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and see you again in actually 2 weeks from now. We're likely going to cancel the call, so I suppose see you in a month. Have a good one, you all. Bye-bye.